थैंक यू मैम, थैंक यू।
हमारे आज के इस प्रथम दिवस के द्वितीय तकनीकी सत्र के वक्ता प्रोफेसर सूरजमल बाब्स फ्रॉम साउथ अफ्रीका. He has associated with us Professor Surujlal Babs. He is working in Northwest University in South Africa as a dean in Research and Innovation, Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences. Sir, we welcome you. Heartfelt greetings from the entire Vipra family. हम आपका स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन करते हैं, आपको साधुवाद प्रेषित करते हैं. आपने हमारे इस आग्रह को स्वीकार किया और हमें अपना बहुमूल्य समय डिवोट किया. मैं आपको सादर आमंत्रित करती हूँ. काइंडली जॉइन अस एंड
Excuse me, Mrs. Divya, Dr. Divya, please speak in English.
Okay, sir.
Please speak in English. Please understand that you have to speak in English so that he can understand. What you're saying.
Yeah, definitely, sir. I'll try.
Please make sure when you have a participant from abroad, that you speak in the proper language. It's very important.
Okay, sir. I am really sorry for the inconvenience. I would like to invite Professor Surujlal Babs. He is working in South Africa, Northwest University as a Deputy Dean, Research and Innovation, Faculty of Economics and Management Studies. Sir, I invite you with all due honor and respect to present your views before us. Professor Surujlal Babs.
Good morning, colleagues from the different parts of the world. I want to start off by thanking Dr. Divya. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, I can see your screen, but it is showing your name only.
No, I'm trying to share my PowerPoint.
No, sir, it is not visible.
It is not visible.
Only your initial name is coming over here. Your name only.
Okay, I'm just going to try and share the screen again.
Yes, sir.
Okay, start my video.
Yes, sir. We can see you.
Right, and I just want to try and share my screen now. Share screen. Am I sharing?
Sir, still the presentation is not visible. We can see you, not the presentation.
Okay, I'm just encountering a little technical problem here. Let me try one more time.
Yes.
Let's see. Right. Right. How's it now?
Yes, it's okay, sir.
Okay, now thank you very much, Dr. Divya, for that kind introduction. I would also like to thank Professor Kel Verma for his very excellent introductory speech. And then, of course, at the outset, I'd like to thank the organizers from the Department of Education, Vipra Arts, Commerce, and Physical Education College for extending the invitation to me to be part of this very great gathering. I also want to thank the previous speaker, Dr. Rajiv, for his very excellent presentation. Although I was born in South Africa, India has always held a very special place in my heart. So it is therefore indeed a real pleasure and privilege to be among such esteemed scholars and academics. I just want to get to the right slide of mine. Right, so this is it. And right. So the global COVID-19 pandemic has actually necessitated such an increased number of meetings like the one that we are having today to share our thoughts, ideas, experiences of the pandemic, as well as our response to it. I want to thank the organizers for their wise choice of the theme for today's webinar. Yes, teachers or educators or academics whatever we choose to call them, play a very significant role in the institutions they work in, and more particularly in the lives of their students. For ease of reference, I'll refer to them as academics throughout my presentation. So these academics are actually can be regarded as sculptors who mold and shape the future of their students and provide the foundation on which they build their lives. If they are under pressure or any stress, it is highly unlikely that they will be able to perform this important function to the best of their ability. Currently, the COVID-19 pandemic stands between them and their potential to perform their duty optimally. So we have a situation here where not only the performance of their duty, but also the pandemic, which is coming in between their performance of the duty. So if we look at the global COVID-19 pandemic, it has first and foremost been quite a human tragedy, which affects millions of people worldwide. It has been described as the biggest global event and challenge for humankind. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly impacted on the lifestyles of many human beings globally, ravaging almost every facet of human life. It has left people trying to bridge an expectation gap of what is expected and what reality is. And this includes issues around how quickly the pandemic would pass, how effectively the virus would be contained, and solutions to the virus. Many people face issues around their mortality, their coping skills, and their ability to adapt to rapidly occurring changes. Consequently, many people, academics being no exception, are left feeling anxious, stressed, and even in fear. Although primarily a health issue, serious economic, social, as well as political implications are associated with the pandemic. The virus has actually saved or spared no sector. And the pandemic has actually created significant challenges for the global higher education committee, as the community, I mean. It has disrupted normal day-to-day running of colleges and universities. And from this point, I would like to refer to colleges, universities, tertiary institutions as higher education institutions. So in response to the pandemic, which has disrupted human lives, governments globally have introduced stringent protocols to curb the spread of the virus. Some of the protocols included social and physical distancing, restricted numbers of mass gatherings, such as funerals. They've also restricted domestic as well as international travel. They've taken steps to detect and isolate cases. They have introduced contact tracing, quarantine, and lockdowns. So some of these aforementioned protocols, especially the lockdown, has impacted on the education sector at all levels. There are far-reaching consequences which will require institutions, higher education institutions in particular, to transform and repackage themselves for the now and what we refer to the new and next normal. Most higher education institutions were forced to close as a result of the stringent physical and social distancing measures. So during the first week of April this year, higher education institutions in more than 175 countries and communities responded to the pandemic by closing their doors and halting all face-to-face learning. So according to the World Bank Group, this actually disrupted the studies of over 220 million students globally. The number of students affected has since increased significantly. So if you look at the figures that have been provided by the World Bank for regions it reported on, you can now observe that in excess of 96% of the students have experienced this phenomenon. So faced with a unplanned and unwanted situation, the widespread lockdown of higher education institutions necessitated immediate and critical response by leadership teams to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, minimize disruption of the academic programs, and to save the current year, as well as to strategize for the following academic year if the situation does not improve. In the majority of cases, lessons at higher education institutions are normally presented through contact sessions with learners. However, with diminished interpersonal contact, it has become impossible to continue with contact sessions. So higher education institutions therefore had to face the harsh reality of thinking of alternative structures to mitigate the impact of this lockdown. So this brings me to the focus of my presentation today, that is, the challenges of accommodating alternative delivery structures in higher education in a global pandemic. Although I refer to the actions of the higher education institutions as a response, in many instances, it was more of a knee-jerk reaction. In order to save the year, higher education institutions were compelled to change to remote learning almost overnight. We have often heard during the past 4 months that because the pandemic is a global issue, we are in the same boat. But there are differing views regarding this. Some say we are not in the same boat, but we are in the same storm. Regardless, we are currently on a journey we never dreamt of, and the ride is not a pleasant one. So higher education institutions globally moved their courses to online, and faculties also rushed to adapt their curriculums to a virtual environment, introducing technologies and websites that could help higher education community to access teaching, learning, and research platforms. These indeed had financial implications on some institutions, especially with regard to cash flow. Many universities get their income from parking fees, food and refreshment outlets, etc. In some instances, some institutions had to refund their students who were no longer using the university accommodation or the hostels. So the current situation that most of us find ourselves in, that is an online teaching mode, is not a perfect solution, but under the circumstances, it may perhaps be the best possible solution. Globally, many countries have responded quickly to the pandemic by allocating teaching and learning resources according to their availability. Where technology was available, they were enhanced to accommodate different platforms to suit the needs of their students. The question is, are higher education institutions generally well prepared to support thousands of academics moving quickly from in-person to online teaching? In South Africa, we surveyed all the universities and found that not all of them were fully ready for the transition to online learning. I will speak to that later in my presentation. Recently, several concerns regarding online teaching and learning have been raised. The World Bank identified a few technology bottlenecks which higher education institutions had to and needed to anticipate and be prepared for. Among these are the capacity of academic staff to deliver online classes, students' capacity to adapt, mistakes that can occur during this transition, the technical support available at different institutions, and unequal access to connectivity, data, and digital devices. So let's look at academics. Some academics never taught online, and these academics have been found to be underprepared to deploy content in the new mode. They are suddenly required to reinvent themselves, to adapt to the demands of online teaching. And as we look at the theme of this webinar, this increases their stress levels. They are also required to attend either digital learning training or alternatively teach themselves. Not all teachers and students were techno-savvy before the pandemic. So as the technical requirements of using technology for teaching are far greater than traditional in-class teaching for these individuals, they find themselves in a situation that required much more time and effort than before. And I'm sure many of us who are academics here do realize that if we need to save the year, if we need to ensure that we complete the work that we plan to do this year, we've got to work harder than before. So the lack of experience then necessitated a quick transition into new teaching modes. This meant that academics had to quickly learn as they went about preparing their lessons. Academics also suddenly faced the challenge of getting learning material in different formats. This required extensive planning, designing new lessons, preparing teaching materials using technologies such as audio, video, and other related technology which are accessible to most students. In some instances, this meant greater dependency on technology support of the higher education institution. And in this regard, the World Bank found that very few higher education institutions had facilities or processes in place to provide the technical and pedagogical support to academic staff. The interruption of the normal modes of learning also had ripple effects on students. Reimers in 2020 argued that the suspension of learning not only affects results, it also results in a loss of learning time, as well as the loss of knowledge and skills that are gained. So furthermore, time is not lost as learners and teachers need to quickly adapt and adjust to new modes of learning. They also need to sit back and reflect on how they need to cope. There's also a shift to move to new modes of delivery, and this has been unsettling not only to students, but also to academics. Students, when they arrived at the higher education institution, they came psychologically prepared for face-to-face interaction when they registered for the courses at that institution. So although the current situation places more demands on them in terms of their time and effort, and they may be quick to adapt, students do face challenges that can lead to their dissatisfaction with their academic experience, and academics therefore need to be prepared for the varied responses of students. The current circumstances we find ourselves in may be viewed as an emergency. during which we learn by doing and we learn along the way. And because of this, there is a high likelihood we will make mistakes along the way, and that is human. However, we need to also ensure that we can minimize their impact and correct mistakes when and how they occur. We should remember that although academics get their instructions from a higher level on what they should do, they are viewed by their students as the drivers of processes. So it is therefore important that academics are reasonably well prepared for their lessons. This may require that they may have to go through their course materials very, very thoroughly. They need to plan in a way that the outcomes are achieved within a specific time frame. And of course, this requires excellent time management. Unlike the normal classroom situation where they are very clued up on how they're going to be delivering their lessons, in an online mode, they are really unsure whether the students have grasped what they needed to grasp in the time that is available for them. We are also aware that during the Zoom session that we are involved in now, people can communicate with each other privately, but there is still the issue of security which needs to be taken into account. And because people find themselves in a situation where they are being viewed on a screen, this, of course, makes them very conscious about themselves, and they might not be open to getting fully engaged in the classroom, in the online classroom. At our university, we have not restricted ourselves to a single mode of delivery. However, all course material is loaded on a single site on the university network for students to access. So again, the message here is we should not rely on a single mode of delivery, because we need to be prepared for technology mistakes and failures. So whether it's problems with online platforms or Wi-Fi connections, we must realize that technology can fail. I think one of the things that can be very embarrassing, and I think some of us have experiences before, is if we try to fix problems while the camera and the audio is still on, and your actions and your conversation is caught by your students. So one should be very wary of this and be aware of such situations and immediately switch to another mode, or provide a break to your students while you try to rectify the problem if you have technical support. In many instances, because higher education institutions were caught unawares by the pandemic, they were ill prepared for such a situation. They therefore could not provide adequate technical support to their staff or students. Providing additional technical support meant that higher education institutions had to appoint additional staff. In most instances, this was not budgeted for. What should be borne in mind is the lack of technical support could result in disrupted or cancelled classes. And these can have repercussions. For example, the confidence in an academic's potential to deliver and to deliver quality lessons can be compromised or lost. Students may lose interest. Also, concerns regarding the reputation of the university can be at risk if complaints fall into the wrong hands. The question is also whether students are really getting value out of the new mode of learning. Because with the increasing number of positive cases that we are experiencing, especially in South Africa, there's also concern whether the education of the current cohort of students could be salvaged without the necessary technical support structures which is needed at the university. One of the biggest challenges that has reared its head during these trying times was the adequacy of connectivity, data, and digital tools. We found that both students and staff do not have enough connectivity and devices at home. And this is particularly so for the most remote and poorest areas. Internet access may be a severe challenge, especially for students and academics in small cities and towns. And we know that the digital divide is very, very strong in certain countries as well as within countries. We also know, for example, I was now in two minds whether I should use my camera or not, because sometimes the bandwidth or your local server can let you down if there are too many users of a certain site. So in Africa, we face a very complex situation. Generally, access to technology is a matter of privilege. Many African students are not able to access online education learning platforms at this critical time because of the pandemic and because of limited facilities and access to ICT. A recent survey by UNESCO revealed that 89% of learners do not have access to household computers, and 82% lack internet access in sub-Saharan Africa. Therefore, providing online education in many parts of Africa is extremely challenging. And as mentioned previously, those who have access to the internet have been facing severe challenges of poor connectivity. The cost of data in South Africa is really high. The costs are exorbitant. And there are frequent power cuts. We call that load shedding in South Africa. And many of these are unplanned and can lead to severe disruptions. Another aspect which has been an area of concern was assessment and feedback, which can actually pose a huge challenge. How does one monitor the contributions of all members where, for example, group work is involved? What about online examinations? These online examinations, because of the fact that they are online and the integrity of the process can be compromised, need to be very carefully planned, carefully prepared, so that it doesn't allow for collusion. And also, when one is preparing such online assessments, the question of how one ensures the integrity of the examination and assessment process should always be in mind, so that the loopholes that might be in such a system are not used to the advantage of the students and compromises the process. So now I just want to briefly touch on higher education institutions in South Africa. When the pandemic hit us and we were in lockdown, the first thing that was done was inputs were requested from all public universities in South Africa regarding emergency teaching and learning during the COVID-19 era. Here I will reflect on some of the challenges which are specific in the South African context. I will also share with you how my university responded to the challenges. I'm also certain that many of the challenges which I mentioned are actually common challenges which are in other countries as well. So just to start off, not all universities in South Africa are on the same footing, resource or infrastructure wise. Many of the so-called privileged uh, universities from the apartheid era were very well placed to address the challenges associated with the pandemic. The less privileged universities, however, indicated that it was not possible to start online because of budget constraints, lack of infrastructure, and students not having devices, data, or connectivity. Most students from the disadvantaged universities were from rural areas where access to electricity added to the problems I already mentioned to you. The specific challenges experienced by universities and communities included the following: the lack of preparedness of students and academics, and a very important uh, concern was the lack of preparedness of parents for the strict protocols. You must remember, once the universities had locked down, students were required to go back home, and parents were really not prepared for such an occurrence. There were also delays in implementing strategies. Most universities had strategies in place, but there were delays in implementing these strategies, and I'll touch on that a little later. But in many instances, students were part of extended families, and these extended families lived in very small homes, having 2 rooms, maximum 3 rooms. And with the lockdown restrictions, these students who would normally be on university accommodation or in the hostels had to go back home. The atmosphere in such a restricted area. When I talk about extended families, I talk about between 10 to 15 people occupying a single household. And this was not conducive to learning, and many students were demotivated, and counseling for some students was needed. So at our university, we immediately embarked on proactive measures. Workshops were organized every Monday since April to get staff to share their experiences of the different online teaching that they experimented, tried, and found successful. And during this time, also the challenges were discussed. In addition, uh, there was a teaching and learning meeting every week to address challenges and offer possible solutions. There were support structures which are set up for staff members who were not techno savvy, so that they could actually get support to learn. And in fact, I have learned quite a few during the last 4 months. There were just a few bits of technology that I learned, and you have learned in before the lockdown. And suddenly I was confronted with using the new technology. You must have seen how I fumble a little bit with trying to share my screen on Zoom. So yes, this does happen. We also find the stress levels amongst academics can vary, and it can vary even according to gender, because during the lockdowns, uh, all of us were required to stay at home, and in many instances, uh, the female staff members who are actually also mothers, and they also need to take care of their homes, and they are also academics. They needed to actually plan very carefully to ensure that they ensure a work-life balance. And in some instances, if they needed counseling, the counseling services at the university was always available, not only to the female staff, but to any staff who got into a mode of depression, who had a loss of a family member, who contracted the virus. So those support structures were always there. With the with regard to the students, all students were contacted via SMS or phone calls and informed that they needed to log on to our eFundi website on the university's network to access their course materials. This also provided us with an indication as to who had access to internet connectivity, etc., because we could have a register on the eFundi site to see who had actually successfully linked with the site. Those that did not link with the site, for them, we had organized winter classes where they could attend. These winter classes were not available for those who could connect. And this actually helped quite a bit because we could actually maintain the protocols in terms of social distancing and ensure that we had measures in place to reduce or eliminate the spread of the virus. Then, of course, we had students who did not have data, who did not have devices, and the university was very proactive in getting the information, the data regarding the number of students who did not have laptops, etc. And the university embarked on purchasing the laptop for the students. But before the students received the laptop and accepted the laptop, the student had to sign an agreement regarding the taking care of the laptop and the measures that would be taken if the laptop was either stolen or damaged in any way. So by implementing these proactive measures, the Northwest University was able actually in the month of April to embark on online teaching. Many other universities by June still had not embarked on online teaching. However, the good news is currently almost every university is and has embraced the online teaching mode. As far as the delays in implementing the strategies of online teaching was concerned, the delays were linked to factors which were not in the hands of the university. For example, the university had to negotiate with mobile networks to either provide data at a very reduced rate or free. And this took a lot of negotiation and time, but the university was successful in getting reasonable packages at very reasonable rates. When it came to the laptops, it was in the hands of the supplier. So if the supplier could supply within time, then we managed to actually ensure that the delay was reduced. So having given a mouthful regarding the challenges, regarding how we responded to the challenges and how we actually need to go forward, I want to actually now touch on some of the lessons learned and some of the recommendations. And in this regard, the Chronicle of Higher Education was quite an interesting document to look at because we found that many of the recommendations found in there were things that we could apply, and there were also some of the things that we had learned as far as lessons are concerned. So the first thing was we need to keep things simple. We need to ascertain what technologies students have, and we need to use the technology that we and most students have and are familiar with. We are in a time of crisis, so we do not have the luxury to experiment with new and fancy technology. Academics also need to get a feel at the outset of the challenges that students experience. And if they have this feel, they can devise the means to overcome these challenges. And this actually does not mean that the academics need to do everything on their own. We are all in this together, so we need to support each other. Academics need to be thoroughly prepared. They need to go over their course material. They need to ensure that the units are planned in manageable bite sizes and accommodates the pace at which students work. They need to ensure that the course material is uploaded where the students can access them easily, and deadlines should be planned well in advance. Communication is very important. So everything that the academic needs to be done should be communicated clearly with the students. We should remember that communication is not the same as face-to-face. So we should ensure that the communication channels are clear. Students should know what the main mode of communication will be and what the alternative modes will be. The response time for queries and clarification should be clear. And the roles and responsibilities of both the academics and students should be clearly spelled out. We should also ensure that communication is regular and frequent. We should also ensure that we make the attendance of classes compulsory. We do not want to leave any student behind. Compulsory attendance of classes does not only keep students abreast of what is happening, it also develops discipline. We should try and be as natural as possible during our online classes. We do not want to be saddled with certain problems regarding some situations, and I want to be very cautious about this without offending anyone. We do experience, and I've experienced this in the past as well, where some people, because they know they're going to be on Zoom, they overdress for the online classes. And if we're going to make every session a photo session or a photo shoot, it can be distracting to the students. We should also show empathy. Just as many of us find online teaching challenging, students also find them challenging. So we must be flexible and be accommodating within reasonable limit. We should be organized and methodical. We should ensure that students move through their content and activities smoothly and seamlessly so that their attention remains focused on learning. One of the other important things regarding the material that we provide, it should be visually appealing and stimulating. Now, visually appealing and stimulating does not mean that there should be a large number of pictures and graphics. The design, layout, and appearance of your material should be acceptable. At the outset, students should be explained what is expected of them. They should also be aware that they have expectations of you and they should share that with you as well. And these expectations need to be managed. And then, very important, you should familiarize yourself with the technology or platform you'll be using. This will help you to assist students who also experience challenges with the technology. And always be prepared for technology failures and have a plan B to move to. You must also remember that, and this is especially in our context, that certain technology uses excessive data and we only have limited data for our students. So we should choose the technology which uses probably the least amount of data. So if we take all these lessons learned and the recommendations and what we spoke about previously in my discussion, there are ways and means in which we can actually help academics, we can help teachers to not be stress free, but have a reduced level of stress. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that higher education institutions need to consider several challenges associated with alternative structures of delivery. And given the range of challenges, it would be prudent for higher education institutions to provide a combination of alternative measures to accommodate as many students as possible. And before I say thank you, I want to really express my appreciation to the organizers of this webinar. This is such an important webinar, especially for academics who I am sure throughout globally are going through very, very stressful times, and they not only need to think about their jobs, they also need to think about their families, they need to think about their own protection. And yes, so the organizers, thank you very, very much for organizing such a, what can I say, apt webinar. You are muted. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you so very much, Professor Bobs. We are really privileged. You have devoted your valuable time to us. You accepted our invitation, and your presentation is really very significant in worth. The way you delivered the situation, the scenario to us, your area challenges and solutions. We will try to take all the advantages from your presentation. I pay my gratitude on behalf of all the entire Vipra family, Vipra Arts, Commerce and Physical Education College, Department of Education. We really appreciate, and we got ample of appreciations and admiring comments over YouTube. Thank you so very much, sir. Thank you very much. Dear participants, now we are moving towards the completion of the first day of our international webinar. I pay my deep gratitude to Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir of our university, Professor Kesari Lal Verma Sir, the Chairman of our Vipra Section Samiti, Shri Gyanesh Sharma Sir, the Principal of our college, Dr. Meghesh Tiwari Sir, our keynote speaker, Professor Rajiv Chaudhary Sir, our technical session speaker, Professor Surujlal Babs from South Africa, all the participants, the registered participants, the participants who are viewing us on YouTube Live, and everyone who devoted their time, their effort to make this webinar successful. Thank you so very much from all the team, from the entire Wipro family. With these words, I would like to announce the closing of this first day of international webinar, and I would like to announce that at the same time by 10 o'clock tomorrow we'll have two sessions. One session will be taken by the Professor Dr. Rakesh Tomarji from Saudi Arabia, and the second resource person for tomorrow's webinar will be Mr. Ranjit Singh Yadav ji, who is a criminal advocate there in Rewari, Haryana. So with these words, I again thanks each and every unit of this webinar. Thank you so very much. Thank you.